All right, so today we have to talk about this massive Joy-Con leak that is being discussed online, and I am coming at this with a heavy dose of skepticism because while these could indeed be a retail version of the Joy-Con 2 or whatever Nintendo ends up calling their next generation Joy-Con for the Switch 2, this has some red flags for me personally because it is coming to us just from a Chinese content creator that it's very hard to verify track records and things like that to see if this person has ever leaked accurate information related to manufacturing in the past, but you can make the decision on whether or not you think this is real for yourself, because we are going to be looking at these images up close and in detail. And in a year of 2024 where many people have a high quality camera on their smartphone, you can maybe make the asterisk that this person wants to have an extra layer of safety from Nintendo so they're not showing high quality footage, but it's the images here that we're looking at are very obviously blurry and hard to make out specific details, and you might want to do that on purpose if you were trying to hide the fact that this could be a 3D print based off of some of those more accurate leaked images that we saw in the past, such as that prototype unit that did appear to check out, seemed to be 100% legit. It had a main board with all of the correct placement for different components, and we had some CAD rendering files based off of those exact dimensions, which does seem to give us a little bit of a glimpse of what the final retail product that Nintendo is shipping might look like. But this one we have to go through in greater detail because it's getting picked up on every corner of the internet, and I do want to throw in my 2 cents on whether or not this is real, and also if it's not real, how close is this potentially to the finalized retail product, because I do believe it lines up largely close to what we should expect Nintendo to ultimately ship. So we're going to get on the same page with all of this info. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And we have to first kick off this conversation by hopping right over to Nintendo Everything, where they do have a nice write-up pointing out all of the notable pieces of information here. Okay, so shout outs to Nintendo Everything because they do have not only a nice rumor write-up around what we're looking at here, but the reason I wanted to go through it on their website in particular is because they have a nice big image we can look at here together, but also what each thing is signifying here. So you have right out of the gate the one look at the IR blaster, which is being circled down beneath, and there's a couple things to point out here. One, if you look at it real up close, it does appear that there is like a slight curve in as the Joy-Con rounds down, like way more pronounced than what is in the current Joy-Cons for the Switch, and the IR sensors are noticeably bigger on the bottom of these Joy-Cons. Now, I'm going to reserve any of the red flags for these images that we're talking about until we get through the bottom, but you will right away notice, you know, some of the things that have lined up with previous leaks we've seen, such as a white and black color scheme for the current Joy-Cons that are being produced for the Switch 2. So the color scheme does match up. We have that additional button, but again, we are at the point in time where people could be running with some of the already leaked information that was out there in the past and doing things like advanced 3D printing, which we will also spend a moment on in a few moments here later on in the video. There's also an image showing a magnet release button or a trigger for horizontal play. So yes, the trigger idea, if it's in horizontal play, does make sense for this, but I do think that we are more than likely, if this is to be believed, that that's where the new Joy-Con release button is going to be. I think we are looking at that, a Joy-Con release button, not a trigger. Although, if you're looking at it again, holding the Joy-Con sideways, you could make an argument that this would make sense for some kind of pullback trigger in that capacity, maybe instead of this SLSR button that we have currently on our Joy-Con. And these are much more noticeably pronounced, buttons, which I would definitely hope is the case, because we're expecting these Joy-Cons to be quite a bit larger for the next gen hardware, and that would mean you'd have some more footprint for a larger button, because the ones on the current Joy-Con that are just quite honestly entirely too tiny for use, and I don't know if I can get my camera to really focus in on that there, but yeah, obviously, like, if you've held a Joy-Con and played any kind of multiplayer game with this sideways, I mean, these buttons are almost unusable. So I would absolutely welcome something that is as big as what we are looking at here, but noticeably here too, and we're going to kind of go back up and talk about some of the red flags, but you notice there's kind of like a lack of markings on any of these buttons that we're looking at. And the belief and the claim from what I can see online is that this user is acting like it's coming from manufacturing. So we're supposedly looking at, finalized retail products, which I would not expect Nintendo to ship with just like such rough, edges and essentially no markings on what the buttons are. Then we have a blurred Joy-Con engineering drawing showing the CMOS location, and you can kind of see that on screen, but it doesn't really do a whole lot for me. Like who's going to be able to tell if that's like a legitimate, diagram from Nintendo? And then this says a blurred engineering drawing of some part of the console. So even some mystery, kind of like from Nintendo, everything themselves. But anyway, there is this kind of interesting point that has come up from the comment section, which is worth talking about as well. So other than the above, it's claimed that Nintendo wouldn't have enough units on hand for a March 2025 launch. Of course, the company has never committed to that time frame. Nintendo has only said it will be making an announcement about what's coming next before the end of the fiscal year, which does end in March, but its launch is another story. So there is kind of some, we can quickly hop over here and look at it, but there's a fan asking, about this rumor about it being revealed in January, released in March. Is it true or false? This user responds with, like, up to their knowledge, production volume is not high enough for a March release, but they do then later say in a comment down below that they do believe that, or they confirm rather, according to their words, that mass production has already started. I mentioned this in the September and October videos. So they're kind of saying, for sure production started, but their belief is that Nintendo won't be able to get up to a high enough level of units to actually ship this thing in March, which again, this is a user, Mario64, over on, I believe Bill, or Billy is a social media site over in China. That's what we're going off of here. And the last piece of like relevant information that is new around this is right at the beginning of the video that they have posted. There is this blurred out detach motion of the Joy-Con. So we'll kind of rewatch that a couple times back so you can see it. It happens like right in this area right here, and you can see how they just pull off the Joy-Con from that supposed finalized Switch 2 console that is in their hands. Very hard to tell how the size of that console that's in their hands compared to the current Switch, but if I was just guessing looking at it, it looks like it's more in line with an OLED model in size, as opposed to that larger mock-up that we saw that one other YouTuber put out there. But the notable thing here within the start of this video is obviously the fact that the way that you would take the Joy-Con off is just by simply clicking in that trigger and then pulling it to the side, because of course we are believed to have mag switches to kind of essentially secure and then detach, or let the Joy-Con detach from the console. So rather than the rail motion sliding up and down, it would just be a quick rip off of the side of the console once that button is pressed in. So the thing about this is it's very blurry footage, as you can see, and just going back to some of these other issues that I have with this, because I do want to believe that, we're in line with kind of what we should expect the controllers to look like, but I'm not sold on these being the legitimate images. Just because if you look at, and I know we're looking at blurry footage here, which is an issue in and of itself, but you just really, in my opinion, don't have any pronounced markings on these buttons. We don't really see any kind of A, B, X, Y, or even arrow outlines for sure, or even like what this additional button might be, or the home marking for the home button. It all seems like something that with a fancy 3D printer could in theory be done and accomplished. And then while this does line up perfectly or close to perfectly with some of those CAD image renderings that we've seen in the past, I don't think Nintendo's going to leave a bunch of unmarked buttons like this on their finalized retail product. I am also somebody who does buy into the theory that we are probably going to see some kind of colored button markings for this next generation hardware, similar to that of the new 3DS. I just think that with this being such a similar form factor to the Nintendo Switch, an easy additional way besides the size and things that Nintendo can do to differentiate this console and make it like kind of clear to the average consumer that it's the next gen hardware, is to do something like colored buttons. And we also have a number of first party and third party Nintendo Switch games that have come out late life cycle that support colored buttons in the software themselves, or actually use those exact color schemes for the gameplay. So I personally am more on the side of thinking that with just enough of how smooth these buttons look and nothing with actually having for sure, like actual what is the logo for each button, I'm skeptical on that. The actual look of the analog sticks, it almost looks like to me, and again this is blurry footage, but it almost looks like the right one that we're looking at here on the right Joy-Con is more of a rounded design. But then if you look at that left one, it does almost seem concaved, like we've seen in a lot of those different leaks. Maybe I'm off on that analysis, I don't know, it could just be in bad angle, but this does look like it's more of that concave design like we saw in those CAD rendering files, as opposed to this one being more of a slightly rounded design. But that's kind of hard to tell from this. I mean, I guess on this particular image, you can see their thumb kind of going down into that, analog stick, which could, it's hard to make out what exactly we're looking at here. And then a very big and pronounced release button, if that is to be believed. And then this is the biggest part that I would definitely be happy to see for the new Joy-Con. But again, no markings on it, really no visible magnets from this part. It does look to have like that kind of center point that we saw that we would suppose some magnets are sitting behind there to essentially attach the new Joy-Cons to the Switch console itself. But nothing here is overly impressive or, high resolution. This is for sure a finalized product. And so that's where I have a little bit of reservation with the entire thing. That said, it is not deconfirmed, and there is absolutely a chance that we are looking at maybe some finalized retail Joy-Cons that just so happen to be filmed on a very blurry, low quality camera. And, the user protecting themselves at the beginning of the video just decided to blur out that entire part where they detach it from the Switch 2. But I would believe if they were taking this big of a risk, that they would likely just show that footage because they're already kind of, acting like they have the Switch 2 and they put their face in the video, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, there's a lot of different red flags around this one for me, but they are being circulated wildly online and largely believed for the most part. There's definitely like some common sense skepticism going on out there, but I'm seeing a lot of people just kind of buy into the fact that this is potentially the Joy-Con 2s and what we're looking at. And while this could be a legit leak, it's sometimes hard to tell, and there are absolutely possibilities that we find out, we look backwards in history and this is legit. I'm erring on the side of caution and believing that this is probably not legit. And also, I will say though, that even though it could just be 3D printed and something that's kind of convincing, well, I think that we're probably largely looking at something that is ultimately very similar to what we will see Nintendo launch with the Switch 2 and their Joy-Cons that will ship with the console. But let me know in the comments down below what you guys make of this personally. Are you on team real or fake for this new Joy-Con leak? And do you think that, something that what we're looking at here is absolutely what Nintendo will ship with their finalized Joy-Cons? Are you expecting any other changes? And what do you think do you think that's a release button, or do you think it's a trigger button when you hold the Joy-Con sideways? And which would you prefer it to be? And what do you make of that kind of attach on sideways motion that we saw at the beginning of the video? I do think that's potentially how we're attaching these new Joy-Cons, but do you think that that was actual footage of it or not? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.